Thank you, Cheryl. So good day, everyone. It's actually evening here, around 6 p.m. in the Philippines. I hope everyone is okay in your respective locations. So today I'll be sharing something different than your usual topic of discussion, but I think it's quite relevant for our current setting nowadays. So I'll be sharing with you some of my insights on how to cope with this pandemic that is disrupting our education, and this is through online teaching and learning. And I believe that it is important that we really understand how we address the concepts behind what we are doing so we can properly plan and strategize our activities. So for some of you, maybe all of us are in lockdown mode right now. For some of you, you will be going back to probably a new normal by next week. For us here in the Philippines, this will be until May 15, at least for our province. So we all know that due to the threat of COVID-19, academic institutions are facing decisions about how to continue teaching and learning. At the same time, they need to keep their faculty, their staff, researchers, and students safe from this public health emergency. And this COVID-19 is really spreading at a very fast pace, and still, it's not yet well understood medically yet. So many institutions since early this year until right now, and I think this will be a continuing decision towards the end of the year. I don't know until when, but many have opted to cancel all face-to-face classes, including labs and other learning experiences. And some have even mandated their faculty members to shift to online courses. Although in Europe, some are returning to their face-to-face classes, but it's an entirely different scenario. But I think more and more institutions, both basic and higher education, are really making this crucial decision each day. But you know, online teaching and learning is really not something new. It has been around for many decades now. But it has actually gained popularity sometime in early 2000 when some of the Ivy League universities, which are actually traditional universities, started offering massive online courses or MOOCs. But now we are forced by circumstances brought about by the COVID pandemic, and we face somehow surreal and unprecedented situation wherein I think we have been robbed by our liberty to choose how we learn as students and teach as teachers. So we suddenly face a different kind of reality wherein the only way for everyone to get through in terms of education is through online learning, at least in the next few weeks or so, or probably months. And none of us, I think, even despite the forecasts and predictions, would have thought that when we started out this year, that we will suddenly be in this kind of environment. So really, this pandemic is a disruption that has indeed caught everyone off guard. So despite advice from education experts of the advantages of using online platform as a supplement to face-to-face learning, many educators and policymakers have not really taken this advice seriously. And despite forecasts and predictions that major disasters, including a global pandemic, can happen anytime, many people have not really paid serious attention to it. Now, as a result, many learners and teachers are not prepared on how to deal with this disruption. So it has actually affected our lives, really, including education. So suddenly, the teachers and students and researchers, we are pressured to transition to online teaching and learning. This is, of course, on top of anxieties brought about by this unnatural way of living, especially like for someone like Cheryl, who is in Japan and her family is back home. So this is bringing about different kinds of anxieties in very unnatural way. And of course, this is aggravated by various concerns, including financial concerns. And even for us researchers, we still have to do our research works and we have deadlines to beat. So I think this is something that many of us is not really prepared to face. So let me just share with you this, you know, if it's evening there, but just today, let me share with you two important concepts that you need to understand in order to be able to strategize and plan your teaching and learning activities. Be it, it doesn't matter if you're a teacher or a student or a researcher or a professional in your own field. I'm sure that you will be dealing with some kind of online communication and interaction. So it's important that you understand how do you intend to do this kind of activity. So for this evening or morning, we'll be talking about emergency remote teaching and learning and how to transition to online teaching and learning. So I don't want to pass up this opportunity, so let me just share with you and pay homage to Dr. Seuss. I know everyone knows Dr. Seuss. I've seen this in social media, and if Dr. Seuss was still alive, he would have this poem. So let me read. I will teach you in a room. I will teach you now on Zoom. I will teach you in your house. I will teach you with a mouse. I will teach you here and there. I will teach you because I care. So just do your best and do not worry about the rest. And one of our professors here at UPOU added these lines. If we teach because we care, we should think not only where, but also how to learn and share. So I think this point becomes very relevant now that we navigate a new kind of learning and teaching that does not only happen inside a physical brick and mortar classroom. So as we have read in social media and watched news all over the world, the decisions of many institutions to shift to online learning have actually created an uproar among teachers, parents, and students. I recently read an article there in Japan that around 70% of the parents would want to go back, would want their children to go back to their usual classes. The speed with which this move to online instruction is expected to happen is unprecedented and really staggering, and many are not prepared. We are talking here of not just the infrastructure, but as well as the skills and capacity of teachers to teach online, as well as capacity of students to learn online. So for many, there is no available support to faculty members on how to implement online learning in such a narrow preparation window. I've read an article, one author said that it feels like we are instructional MacGyvers, having to improvise quick solutions in less than ideal circumstances. So no matter how clever our solution might be, and I think there are really very clever solutions that are emerging, still many instructors will understandably find this process stressful. Before the current situation, we have learned about online learning. But in reality, when people hear about online learning, it somehow carries a stigma of being lower quality than face-to-face learning, despite research showing otherwise. So there have been a number of research done by educational experts showing that online learning is actually at par, or sometimes even better than traditional learning. But still, there is that negative perception among educators. So what is troubling now is that these hurried moves to suddenly transition to online mode by many institutions could actually indeed make this perception a reality, considering that online teaching requires careful planning and design in terms of both pedagogy and technology. taking full advantages of its affordances. So Tony Bates, an expert in distance learning, said, "It is actually not a good idea just to jump into it, meaning online learning, and hope to wing it, because teaching online is not rocket science, but it does need a different approach from classroom teaching." So which brings me to this next topic. In this time of global public health crisis, if an institution suddenly decides to shift to an online mode of delivery, experts in e-learning and instructional design, including big international agencies like World Bank and UNESCO, they're proposing that, to use the term emergency remote teaching and learning. So when we talk of emergency remote teaching and learning, this is just a temporary shift of instructional delivery to an alternate delivery mode due to crisis circumstances. So it involves the use of fully remote teaching solutions for instruction or education that would otherwise be delivered face-to-face or as blended or hybrid courses, and that eventually it will return to its original format once the crisis or emergency has abated. So the primary objective in these circumstances is not to recreate a robust educational ecosystem, but rather to provide temporary access to instruction and instructional supports in a manner that is quick to set up and is reliably available during an emergency or crisis. So when we understand emergency remote teaching and learning in this manner, we can start to differentiate it from online teaching and learning. So in an emergency teaching and learning, it is important to ensure that every learner has access to quality education despite the circumstances. This means addressing issues of inequity, providing multimodal responses, capitalizing on existing infrastructure, and combining various learning mediums to engage students. So, what are the characteristics of an emergency remote teaching and learning? First, of course, is that there should be an emergency or crisis. So just like what we are having right now, this is a global public health crisis. It's a pandemic, meaning the situation is not normal and it is not expected to get better in the coming days or weeks or months. So the emergency closures of schools in many countries may not only cause loss of learning in the short term, but also loss of further human capital and diminished economic opportunities in the long term. So to help mitigate the loss of learning, many countries are pursuing options to utilize remote learning to manage and cope with the crisis. This is especially true to developing countries wherein internet access is actually really a problem. So the second characteristic is that the courses that are normally designed for face-to-face instruction, I mean the courses that are being shifted to emergency remote teaching, are designed for a face-to-face instruction. This means that the activities, resources, and assessment have previously been designed for a normal brick and mortar setup, thus shifting to a different mode would require time and resources on both the school and the teachers as well as the students. And third, due to the emergency situation, there is a very narrow window of opportunity to redesign the course to fit a different mode of delivery. So what are some of the guidelines for an emergency remote teaching and learning that we should take into consideration? So of course, it is important that we analyze the current situation that we are in. What are the existing infrastructures? Are there, do people have access to internet? What are the softwares that are available? What are the content that are available? What are the capacity of the teachers and the learners and support staff, including parents for basic education for that matter? Do they have access to connectivity? What are the support that can be provided to them? And what are the existing processes that would be affected if one decide to do an emergency remote teaching and learning? Another is that you should build on what you already have. Remember, this is an emergency situation. So this is not an ideal situation. Meaning if you don't have an internet connection, then you should find other means to deliver your instruction. You cannot purchase equipment at this moment. You cannot buy or have connectivity easily, or you cannot find resources at your fingertips. So it is better to build on what you already have. And then we should also remember that when we talk of emergency remote teaching, it is not always online and synchronous, meaning it can be offline. You can do other types of delivery, and it need not be real time, meaning people can have access at different time and location. So this is sometimes called the transactional distance, difference in time and space. And then it is also important that when you decide to do an emergency remote teaching and learning, you don't just start from anywhere. You have to revisit your course goals. So so far, among the learning outcomes that you have set for your course, what have you already accomplished, and what are the remaining outcomes that you need to accomplish or address given the circumstances that you are in. So you have to adjust the learning activities, including the assessment that you would be doing. And another is that you have to keep it simple. Sometimes when people think about, oh, I have to do remote teaching and learning, they think of complicated strategies, high-tech things, or high-tech stuff that they would like to do. But in emergency situation like this, you have to remember that you have to keep it simple. What is important is that you'll be able to get in touch with your learners and let them have access to quality education. Another is to establish a system for communication. Remember, in this emergency situation, not everyone is probably connected online. So you have to find ways to communicate with the students as well as the teachers. And it is important to provide support. This is an extraordinary time. People are undergoing a lot of stress, anxieties. So it is really a time for everyone to be providing support to one another. And then, of course, you have to assess learning. Even though if we are in an emergency situation, public health crisis, it doesn't mean that we don't need to assess the learning of the students anymore. Otherwise, it is a lost opportunity for the students to learn. And then, of course, it is important to let us try to look at our existing school policies and try to amend them so that it would fit our current situation. Okay, so which brings me now to the next topic and how online learning is different from emergency remote teaching and learning. So when we talk of online learning, of course, it's learning that takes place online, which means it requires connection to the internet. So like, for example, we're doing Zoom right now. So definitely one of the requirements that is needed is an internet connectivity. But unlike emergency remote teaching, online learning, this is actually one sub-discipline of distance education. This is actually a discipline that has been studied for decades, and there are already existing research studies, theories, models, standards, and evaluation criteria that focus on quality online learning and teaching, online course design, online student support, and even online assessment. So a typical typical planning preparation for an online teaching and learning, which includes course design and development, it would actually roughly probably take a faculty member or a school to develop a course from 6 to 12 months before a particular course is delivered. So faculty are usually, even if the course is already delivered, most faculty members, they become comfortable teaching online by the second or third offering of their online courses. So it will be impossible for every faculty member right now in our current situation to suddenly become an expert in online teaching and learning, given the current scenario that we are in which lead times range from a single day to a few weeks. Imagine after the lockdown, school administrators would require their faculty members, oh, you go online. So that's just something that is impossible to do. So while there are resources to which faculty can turn for assistance, the scale of change currently being required on many campuses will stress the system that provide those resources and most likely will surpass their capacities. This is actually happening right now in the Philippines. Our Department of Information Communication Technology is saying that it's just having difficulty addressing the connectivity issues here because everyone now is doing video conferencing. So even Zoom is actually experiencing security issues because it wasn't originally designed for this kind of range of uses. So let's face it, many of the online learning experiences that instructors will be able to offer their students will not be fully featured or necessarily well planned. And there's a high probability for suboptimal implementation. We need to recognize that everyone will be doing the best they can, trying to take just the essentials with them as they make a mad dash during this emergency situation. Thus, as I've said earlier, the distinction is important between the normal, everyday type of effective online instruction and that most people are actually doing right now, which is doing in a hurry with bare minimum resources and scant time, which is actually more of an emergency remote teaching. So let me just run through some categories of online courses. So one is web presence. So when we talk of web presence, you just use the web to disseminate vital information about the course, such as the course description, requirements, references. And then there's web enhanced. So you use the web to support processes that occur in face-to-face classroom interaction. So this is what's being used in blended learning. I think UNU is actually doing this before the lockdown. So it's a web enhanced because they have a learning management system that supplements their face-to-face instruction. And there's the third category, which is web-based, and this is the fully online. So they use the web as a communication hub in addition to using it to provide access to digital resources. So what are some of the advantages of online learning? So probably right now, many of us are actually considering transitioning to more or less permanent type of online learning after this emergency situation. So one of the advantage really is convenience and flexibility. So you can do this anytime, anywhere, but of course, given that you have internet connectivity. It is more cost effective in the sense that eventually when you go back to the traditional face-to-face classroom, in online learning, you avoid costs like accommodation, transportation, so you can just be wherever you are right now. And it allows for diversity. So just like this one, your organization, it allows for diverse people from different countries to be involved without them leaving their countries. So it allows for both intellectual and cultural diversity. And for well-designed online learning, these are really one of its advantages because it's carefully designed. So just in our experience like right now in the UP Open University, aside from me not being able to go out, my courses, my classes have not actually been affected at all because our courses have really been designed for this kind of situation. But of course, my students have other anxieties uh, brought about by the pandemic. So for some of them are frontliners, some of them lost their jobs. So these are anxieties that are on top of their usual, the normal lives that they're in. So of course, there are in online teaching and learning, teachers are really well trained. This is part of capacity building. How do you facilitate online discussions? How do you provide feedback to your students? And then another advantage is access to resources, because online learning is heavily based on educational resources. So it's easily updated, and teachers have a wide range of resources that are provided to students, that they provide to their students. And of course, learner support is a must. And since students they don't have to leave their work if there are graduate students or even undergraduate students who are doing part-time studies, they can develop real-world skills even if they're studying. And another is that instruction can be better tailored to individual learners. So if you will look at the screen, you will see graphical representation of the advantages of online learning. So as I've said, it's cost effective, wider reach of audience for part-time students who are working while studying. It actually improves work productivity of their organizations, and there are minimal disruption at work. It allows flexibility. It's learner-centered, up-to-date content, customizable, easy distribution. It allows for collaborative learning, easy to track progress, accessibility, and it actually has a lower environmental impact. But of course, there are many drawbacks as well. So like what we are feeling right now, I think the lack of face-to-face interaction is taking a toll on everyone. Of course, human species are social being, and we really want to interact with one another. So I think that's one of the drawbacks of this type of modality. And it actually requires a lot of resources in order to buy equipment, software, and support needed for this type of modality. And the cost of maintenance and updating of content is really, really huge. And program development cost is also a very important consideration. And research would tell you that attrition rate is quite big in online learning. And of course, in assessment, how do you guarantee that it was the actual intended learner who completed the assessment? Okay, so these are the components of online teaching and learning. So if you are a teacher or an administrator or a student, these are the 4 components of online teaching and learning that are very important to understand. So before you're able to offer online courses, you should be able to design and develop the course itself. So it involves a lot of instructional design and planning, and you have to develop everything. And it will take around 6 to 12 months to develop just one course. And then you have to deliver it properly. So you should have a learning management system that is interactive, user-friendly, and accessible to your students. And of course, you should have institutional student support that would address the various needs of your students, because transactional distance is something that sometimes causes that feeling of isolation among students. And of course, organization and management. the schools, universities, institutions should be prepared how to manage this type of modality. Okay, so these are just some of the design principles when doing online teaching and learning. So they're just basic 4 principles. So you design for learning outcomes, you design for your learners, and you design with digital resources and technologies. And of course, you design for interaction with others. In order to have this kinds of interaction. So it is important for an online course or an online environment to have these types of interactions. So if you would look at the screen, there's that learner-learner interaction. So it's interaction among the peers, which eventually would develop into a community of learners even after the course itself. And then there's the learner-teacher interaction, teachers providing feedback, learners asking the professor for some clarifications. And then there's also the learner content. Remember when I said earlier, when you're designing online courses, it's important that it's properly designed in order for the learner as well as the teacher to have that kind of interaction with the content. Okay. All right. So as an ending self-reflection questions, if you are in this situation right now, and if you're a teacher or a student or probably an administrator, or if you're in a position wherein you will be asked to shift to something else aside from the traditional brick and mortar type of learning, you have to ask yourself first, what are my goals? Is this a temporary thing? Am I just responding to this emergency situation? Or do I plan to make this more or less integrated to the way I teach or the way I learn? And then, of course, you have to ask yourself, what are the resources available to me, both external and internal? Will my school provide for the resources needed for this type of learning? Will my co-faculty, co-researchers, colleagues be open to this type of learning, teaching and learning? Would the parents, would the students be open to this type of learning? And of course, eventually, what are the needs of the stakeholders? Remember, eventually, teaching and learning is actually a community of learners. So you should take into consideration the different stakeholders in the learning process. And I think that's it. And probably it would be best to just entertain questions and clarifications regarding this matter. Thank you.